to hear what it's really like to be a voice actor. It's the Voiceover Gurus Podcast.
Welcome back to another fantastic episode of the Voiceover Gurus Podcast. I'm Linda Bruno with yet another interesting guest. I'm happy to say that I'm not recycling some of the old people. Not that people don't want to hear from them. It's just still nice to get some fresh perspectives on the voiceover industry. And I would like to welcome to the program Matt Cowlrick. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Now you're from originally. Tell me how you started. First off, like where are you born? Where'd you go to grade school? Where'd you?
Yeah. Well, for more information, my memoirs of the early years, high bestseller. I was born in Australia, and I spent the early years there and went to university in Australia, studying music. And then I was becoming enamored with voiceover around that time of high school and uni. And then I spent a couple of years traveling, spent a year living in the UK, did a bit of voiceover work in London when I was living there, and then back to Australia. And then in 2011 was ready for the next travel adventure and ended up in Canada. And of course, through work friends and various VO events, spending a lot of time in the US as well. But I'm based here on Vancouver Island, British Columbia.
Oh, how long have you been there?
The whole time I moved to Canada. I moved to just outside Victoria, or I moved to Victoria and never left. So it's been over a decade now, which is crazy. Where does that all go?
So how do you find, well, first off, we'll back up. So you actually got interested in voiceover in high school and then university. So you were early on knowing that you wanted to do this.
Yeah. I think the first ways that I came to it, I'm sure similar to many, was through animation and video games. Mm-hmm. And when I was in school, I was involved in theatre and doing the school musicals, doing plays, that sort of thing. It was I was very very much an arts kid during that time, and then I discovered, as far as this part of making games and making animation, there are people who have this as a job, doing the voiceover end of it. And so I began, I guess more on the fan side of it, or, just geeking out about the medium in general, animation and games, started researching it more, discovering how things were made. And then that was still in the, I don't know how I would describe that time of the internet, but information was not as readily available as it is now.
Yeah.
So that was around 2000 and 2003. So, it wasn't exactly a, black hole, but you had to search things out. So I did a lot of digging and I read. Yeah, totally. And there were a few books out at that time that I was able to get hold of to learn more about voiceover specifically. And then when I was in university, I started delving into it a little more, playing around with some gear at home and linking up with the music technology students at my music school, and playing around in the booth. And that was I think when I really started sinking my teeth into things.
Did you wind up going to the UK for that, to pursue VO?
No, I just did a little bit of what is pretty common in Australia, the gap year, or it's a bit of a it's an Australian cliche to go and live in Europe and hang out there and just bum around continental Europe and the UK. And so I did that, and it just so coincided with a bit of a kick in my voiceover career. Then I had done some good work in Australia, just as I was in university. I was doing some commercials, and then I managed to snag a cartoon series when I was in Oz, and it was it was pretty early on in my career. I'd put in some performance work, but I just I guess you could call it a little bit of a break, and I did that work, but I didn't. While I was doing the work, I didn't do any marketing through that time. It was very, very early on in my, my business mind. And so I guess I was in the approach of what is marketing? And and then those jobs ended, and then I had no more work, and I was like, oh, okay. Oh, all right.
That's the conundrum, yep.
Yeah, so I went and did some travel, and then I ended up more permanently in London, and started doing some local work there through an agent and through studios in London, in addition to still chipping away at building work from my home studio.
Now, is it your focus on commercial work and animation, or would you just basically audition for anything and everything?
Oh, yeah, early on, absolutely. I think when I started looking at animation and games as the mediums that I was really interested in, I had some very useful conversations with some working actors at the time who said, oh yeah, that's all well and good, especially in the context of Australia. It's all well and good to want to do that type of work, but there's not a lot of it. So you need to supplement your career with doing corporate and commercial, have a well-rounded career, like have a good pie of different types of work. And I took that advice to heart, and so I was kind of going out for everything, and like many of us, I was working in all the different voiceover areas, IVR, e-learning, I was happy to, for sure.
So was there a particular job that you booked and you were like, oh my gosh, this is it, I've made it? Or what was your first big client?
Yeah, I think in Australia, I had been doing some projects online, and even doing some amateur voice acting projects. There was a community which I don't know if it still exists, but it was around at that time, around the early 2000s, and I was just doing fan projects and that sort of thing, and I was making a little bit of money from various things. But then when I was in university, I booked a national commercial through one of the production houses in the city I was living in, and I was a dirt poor music student, and then I did this. Went in and was there for like 45 minutes and made a bunch of money doing a couple of spots, and I was like, "This is the best! I've made it." And then back to my original point, I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess I need to find more work." Otherwise, that was a one time thing.
Yeah, I talk about that too. I had a similar thing. Moved to New York, booked this great job, got all these residual checks, and then I didn't work for 6 months. So,
right.
And you're thinking, this is it. I made it. I moved to the big city, and then life, slaps you around a little bit. So
yeah.
So you've been doing VO for a very long time. I mean, I'm not saying that you're old. You don't look old to me. But you started to branch out into production. What else do you do as well as auditioning?
Yeah. So when I started going full time back in 2012, I always embraced working with a team, like having a team, even however big it was, and casual contractors, and that's been an important part of my career, I'd say, from the early days, and for the last many years, and certainly day to day, the biggest part of what I do is voiceover. But I think that the city that I live in, Victoria, it's a smaller and somewhat emerging market, and I found that in my daily voiceover work, even though I connect a lot with studios on Source-Connect and do patch sessions and work in real time with creatives, I kind of missed the the presence of people and that sense of working in person. And over time, I just started following threads that were presented to me of working locally here and having a audio production business, where people would ask me, "Oh, do you mix spots, blah blah blah, or do you rent out your studio?" And I always said no. And I don't personally do audio post, but people that I've hired do. And I guess the way my businesses outside of voiceover evolved is I just eventually started saying yes to things and thought, oh, this could be fun. And especially once I factored in the idea of working locally with real people, that kind of got me jazzed up, and I started to follow that theme. And it's led to a small audio production company here in Victoria, and then a small consulting business as well. And most of the day-to-day of those companies I leave to my team. And I'm not sure if that answered the question, but that was the journey of those little side hustles, and it was kind of done off the side of my desk amidst voiceover work. And then I realized, the only way to kind of keep the momentum and to actually serve clients in the same way that I like to serve my clients in voiceover was to put the resources as far as people power and having a small team.
That's great. I know, it's such a solitary business, especially, everybody's at home working, and it's important to have that, connections. I also work out of a studio too, so I feel you. It's like I like to see people. I like to at least have lunch with someone. And it just helps me creatively stay, on my game. And it also motivates me because heaven knows if I spend too much time by myself, I'll get distracted. I'll do laundry. I'll, feed
So
the cat.
You work from your home studio and an external space as well?
I work just from an external space because...
Okay.
Yeah, my husband works from home since COVID, and he's a very loud talker. And there is no way that I could have, he's on the phone constantly because he's in finance. So I love the fact that I can come here and have my quiet. I don't have to worry about landscapers or dogs barking. It's nice. Yeah, it's really nice. And it's also people that I've been friends with for like 20 plus years.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So, I feel I'm very blessed. And I can have students come here physically because I'm on Long Island. So it's a very concentrated area of a lot of people. And people don't have to go to the city. They can just come to our studios and get training. Or, we have some celebrities that'll have houses out in the Hamptons, but they'll come here to record their voiceover, which is kind of cool.
Oh, very cool.
So, something.
There's something to be said for that external space, I think, especially for creatives. We're very lucky that we have the ability to work from home, but I found, particularly in the early days of building my business in terms of marketing and admin and, just a hustle, there was some days where it was really hard to just come into the same space in my home, as great as it was, just to have that flexibility. I found I think the repetition and maybe also the convergence of home and office, it just sometimes cramped my style. And I always found myself, like throughout my career, going to a coffee shop or going to there's co-working spaces where you can rent a hot desk. And it was almost like, especially when I found that I was doing big blocks of marketing, when I wasn't getting as many sessions and auditions, it was almost like going to a workplace for a specific task. And I found for my personality and my creative brain, that was a very important mechanism to just like remove myself from this creative space. And then to have a booth there at where you do it, I think is really useful, because then I eventually found the problem was time away from the mic was a little too risky with agents and the type of work that I do now. It's a bit more faster turnaround. To have a booth at the outside space is really handy.
My when I first started out, and when you're first starting out, you are pushing. You are auditioning for everything. You are aggressive if you really want to get anywhere. And I would wind up working like 12 hours of the day. And like I would, like at the time where I lived in Philadelphia, my studio was in the basement. And I physically had to just go close the door to go have any kind of life. Because otherwise, you know, as small business owners, we're constantly thinking of, it doesn't end. You know, nothing, the workday, you'd love to say that it does, but you're still thinking about stuff. Or you're still waking up in the middle of the night with an idea, you know. But having that, I had trouble with that. So I had to hear my hours. Like, I don't work weekends anymore. I used to for a very long time. But to put some limitations in place, I guess, so you can have that work-life balance and still keep your mental sanity.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Important.
I think a short-term hustle can be very productive. You know, you're in a zone of productivity and everything is making sense, and sometimes you just have to capitalize on that and work a 12-hour day because, and it could be marketing, or it could be, you know, just clearing up your bookkeeping, but it does hit a limit, I think, for any of us as humans, where it's not sustainable in the long term. And I've gone through periods of my career where I've felt like, oh, well, I should just be able to figure it out, you know. I should just be able to do the balance, and to you know, have any sort of cheap tricks or tools or mechanisms was, you know, it made me feel like I wasn't, I don't know, strong enough or capable enough of like managing my own day. But as I've gone along, I've adopted various tools and mechanisms and methodologies from books and podcasts to just protect that balance between getting the work done, but also gearing down and refreshing each day. I have not been embarrassed to do it as of late. I'm like, whatever works, I'll do it. Yeah.
Do you have anything in particular you do now if you know that you need to go like into a focus zone and focus on a particular aspect? Is there anything that you do?
Sure. I find that at the moment I've actually just got onto a new tool which I really like a piece of software, and I haven't used apps for that particular thing for a while, like time management. It's just been things that have become ingrained in me, but I've just you know, I've got a 5-year-old daughter, and you know, life is busy, and I just suddenly found space for this app. It's called I have to actually look at the name.
I know. Please share.
It's called Structured, and I mean, it's following a tried and tested theme of a to-do list, but I really like the way that it. So essentially, if you have an appointment at 12 p.m. in one day, and you're waking up at say 6 a.m., then it'll actually acknowledge, oh, you have 6 hours free between 6 and 12. What do you want to fill it with? And if you've already got a pre-populated to-do list of, say, you know, a variety of tasks, it could be admin, it could be marketing, it could be finance, and you can populate that time with either just say a batched theme, so only marketing. I'm going to do an hour and a half on marketing, and just the way the app functions is very intuitive as far as how you slip those tasks into the time. And then once you add that hour and a half, it'll say, okay, you've got what is that, 4.5 hours left. Are you going to do anything in that time? And then what it also will do is it will prompt you to be realistic with your time and say, okay, you've got 30 minutes. Do you want to just take a break? And I was like,
oh,
yes,
wow.
Yes, app, I do want to take a break. I think I'll just chew out.
Structured,
yeah.
Structured,
yeah,
I have to check that out.
Yeah, it's iOS and on the computer, and it synchronizes between your devices. And I honestly, thought I wouldn't be drawn to an app like that after, I don't know, feeling a bit of fatigue from productivity apps for a while. Yeah. I mean, they're great, but I felt like I'd got, at that time, my purpose out of them. And then, I really will try to embrace that outside studio space where possible, as opposed to my home studio space. Like if I'm not digging the vibe that I'm writing for the day, then probably what I do need is to just change up my environment. And but yeah, otherwise I'm similar to you. I don't work on weekends, and just because of family, I will try to. As much as this isn't a 9-to-5 job, I tend to use the boundaries of 9 to 5 somewhat.
Yeah. And I explain to students too, in the early days, just like anything, starting your own business, you're going to work some strange hours, especially if you're still holding down a regular job. And then maybe the evenings are the only time that you can record or look for clients. It's like that balancing act. Until you can hopefully. So now, did you ever hold a regular job while you were auditioning? Were you also working, or were you just right out the gate making money?
I was working for a while as a musician in Australia, but very minimally. Like I was definitely in the struggling artist stage, and so while I was trying to build my voiceover career, though I tended to make, very sporadic income out of the gate, it wasn't dependable. So any of my 9-to-5 jobs were pretty entry level. I am thoroughly unemployable now at this point. Like,
yeah, right.
there is. If this doesn't work out, yes.
There's no plan B.
Yeah. If that was your question, like I had day jobs or work that wasn't in the voiceover industry on the side, and there was certainly a point where I tried to gear whatever job I took was very conducive to building the voiceover career, like actors in New York and LA,
right,
and wherever else. And so I would either get up very, very early in the morning, like before 5 to do auditions and get out cold emails and that sort of thing before my job, or I would, stay up later. And then when I eventually made the change to full-time voiceover, I guess I was, it was fortunate timing for me because I was still quite young and unattached, no responsibility. And I made the decision where if I could, though there's no dependability and consistency in what we do for the most part, if I could generally count on enough repeat work or somewhat dependable work, like if I was on a regular e-learning job, if I could count on that to make each week what I would have made in basically a minimum wage job in Canada, then that was the point where I said, okay, I'm just going to go full-time voiceover because, though I have the stability of this 9 to 5, it's holding me back as far as availability and full focus. Yeah, and I was like, if this just falls flat on its face and I eat dirt, then I'm young. I'll probably recover from it.
You'll find something else. Yeah. Well, I think you and I both kind of started around the same time in the early 2000s, where the landscape was a little different than it is now. And I think with you, I know with me, I did start with the pay-to-plays. I was on Voice 123 very early on. And I wound up building up a lot of my first set of clients separate from the agents through there. You had some experiences with the pay-to-plays too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Voice 123 was a big piece of, my start. And I think I was probably one of the Australians who had a home studio, like a small number of Australians who started early with a home studio, because Australia is an industry, the voiceover industry in Australia is, I think, kind of similar to what LA and New York were for a long time, where you have to be in the city
physically there
to get voiceover work. And so there wasn't a huge prevalence of home studios. And right from the get-go, I took that on board, just loving to tinker around with things, and like it was very appealing to me. And so I think that was in my favor for a while, especially being on the pay-to-plays, and then reaching out to agents globally and studios that were happy to work with talent remote. And then when I moved to Canada, I was certainly in a really strong position to work with people in this time zone, because if you're in Australia tough. Now, it's it's what, 7 a.m. or 6 a.m.
Right.
Yeah.
Now,
I totally used those casting sites early on for sure
to get yourself started. So also the uniqueness of you being Australian and doing an Australian accent, putting yourself into the American market, that must have been pretty beneficial to give you a little step up, Yeah.
It was a really good niche to ride for a while. And, I certainly got a lot of momentum pretty early on from it. And, just being hip-pocketed by lots of people as their Aussie for the once in a blue moon job. When an Aussie voice was required. And I like that. And I still do a bit of Australian work, but I just being here in Vancouver is a very busy market as well, for animation and commercials. And as I did this for longer, I started to think about, if I want to work in the higher levels of commercials in the US and Canada, then I do have to ditch the Aussie accent and focus on developing my US and Canadian, neutral North American.
Oh, I want to hear it.
Yeah, it was already pretty strong, and I was working with coaches at the time, and one of my coaches, Nancy Wolfson, she was like, "Why aren't you auditioning in like with American accent? Why aren't you doing American work?" And I was like, I don't wanna. And she kind of pushed me, and I did like a little bit of training just to like tweak the weaknesses in the dialect. But now all these years later, I mean, 90% of my work is with a US accent and or Canadian. Yeah, like Australian and British-ish and international accents is like a smaller piece of my pie now.
Okay.
And I love that. It's been a really fun evolution of my work. It meant it meant changing up my honking big kangaroo branding. So
is that what you had?
What was that?
Is that was your branding before?
Yeah, down under voiceovers, and just had a giant yellow kangaroo.
That's funny.
And I found that it was a barrier for agents and their buyers. And I just had some really good conversations with my representation to like, hey, what do you think about me just ditching this and also showing up on recording sessions and losing the accent in chit chat, and in between takes. And I got some good feedback on that, and that's kind of the way that I do it now.
So I know, well, you're saying now that you do a lot of work with the American accent or Canadian accent. I do some character work, but the way I get into character is I say a line that triggers me into that voice. I'm really bad with Australian accents, so I don't do them, but I would be like, oh, crikey, so that would get me into it. Or Scottish, I'd do something like that. So if you have to get yourself into an American accent, what would you say? What would be a cue for you? Or do you have one? I mean, you might not.
What's that?
Or do you have one? You might not have one.
I do for some certain types of reads. It's usually like a job that I've been on, or something that really throws me into the space of that read and that viewpoint. But I think doing the US accent is so ingrained in me now that I can just jump into it,
turn it on and off.
But I definitely had techniques that I would lean on early on, go through all the hard words or like I'd have a phrase to throw me in there. And I do a bit of character work as well. In games and cartoons. And I use the same thing. I'll have like a an anchor to just lock in, and voice matching as well. I do a little bit of voice matching, and so I'll have that person's phrase that is signature to me.
Right.
I think that's useful. Yeah.
So how many accents do you perform in, like, the character work that you do?
Oh, sure. I don't know if I could tell you off the top of my head.
Is it easier to say what you don't do? Is that a smaller list?
I think it's been really nice. Like the way that the industry has shifted to authenticity, it's meant that accents, that just being a ham and being an actor that I would always play around with. I think a lot of us as actors that with certain ethnicities from different countries around the world, we play around with them, and now there's not really a space for us to do that,
right.
as as Caucasian actors, which is great. I mean, I think in audiobooks it's a little different. Like you still you still want to imply that character, that region. Audiobooks tend to be a little more forgiving as far as the authenticity of accents. But I do differentiate between the accents that I do for say national broadcast level, and then something that is more charactery and or might be it. I do a British accent that flies in the US and in Canada, but to audition for a UK spot that's playing in the UK, I'm a little more coy or shy about that. Yeah, and so for working in commercials on the national level or promo, I tend to just stick to US, Canadian, Australian, British, and then I don't know if you've ever had discussions on this podcast about the international accents, like the transatlantic and
yes,
the
mid-Atlantic,
mid-Atlantic. Yeah. Yeah, I do a lot of that, which I basically just frame as doing a crap accent consistently. So, if I'm doing a bad South African accent, but I use the same rules for the vowels and the phonetics each time, then I'm like, it's global, man. It's you don't know where he's from, and they're like, no, we really don't know where he's from, because that is not a real accent.
That was a request that it was saying that a voice that you couldn't quite tell where they were from. It was like a very neutral, like it wasn't swayed one way or the other. I don't know if you've ever come across that request before.
Oh, all the time, yeah. And it's huge with the European market and certainly other international markets outside of US, Western countries, I think, or English speaking countries. It's very popular to have an accent that can't quite be placed, but the most common direction I get is not too American or not too British. And it works well for the brands that are multinationals and have a certain standing across the globe where they're known in a lot of countries. They don't necessarily want to gravitate towards any place in particular unless they're doing localized campaigns in each individual country. Then they just want to, they want to do a catch-all accent, which, to me ends up being, I usually get directed into something where they'll be like, oh, it's a little too American. Can you make it less American? And I'm like, sure, yeah.
So how do you make it less American?
So the R sound is the R. It gets softened, and then again, like that idea of doing a crap accent but in a consistent manner. I'll do like if I started with an American accent, but then the American guy, he's actually German and he learned English in the United States, so he's like not. He's not very strongly German, but he's got like this European lilt, but then the American R's are still in there. So it's like, if you listen to podcasts like The Economist, and there's a wonderful publication Monocle, and they also do podcasts, and there are these incredible correspondents and journalists, and they are living exactly what we're talking here, as far as like, you know, always he lived here and then he lived there, and I would say actually out of all the going back to our discussion about the anchor line or like the jump in line, I use so many of those people from like from those podcasts if I'm trying to do a transatlantic accent, and I'm trying to like get into that zone of one that I do a lot, and I'll just be like, hello, I'm Jason Palmer for The Economist. And he's like,
and
you
then
know,
you'll go into it.
Yeah, he's kind of British, and it's like, we've been serving customers across the globe for many years. You know, it's, yeah.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a big market for it outside of the US. I mean, we see the specs in the US here and there, as you said, like that, oh, you can't quite place, she's a woman of the world. He's, you know, he's a guy that's lived everywhere, blah, blah, blah. But that's kind of more few and far between, I think, in US casting. But if you look outside the US and like the Source-Connect studios in Asia Pacific and Europe, the middle, like EMEA, Europe, Middle East, Africa, that type of work is just littered throughout. And you know, I don't think it has to be like, that's not work that needs to be controlled by guys like me who are from, you know, Australia or, you know, have a British-ish accent. I've encouraged a few US talent who do have an ear for accents, but they're like, oh, my British accent is terrible. I'm like, use it. Go use it. Like, your bad British accent could be a great transatlantic or global accent. And it's really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think my most favorite spec of all time so far has been, we want a voice we've never heard before. So, well, what do we do with that?
Yeah. Oh, well, that's mine. I don't think I've read for you before.
Right. So do you think that, what do you get hired for most? What vocal quality do you get hired for most, or what performance style?
It's very interesting. As I started doing more, you know, regular English accent work, like US accent work, a character that, for an authentic sounding read, that I just started to gravitate towards and tend to book a lot in, is just like a darker, like a more attitude, and I kind of call him like a lovable asshole sometimes, or like a, you know, like there's just like there's an attitude that I don't, as Matt, regular Matt, have in my day-to-day life. And it's, I think dark is maybe overstating it a bit, but it's like, it's just like a little more edgy side of me. And so I think, it's like that edgy read. You know, like in terms of commercials, it's, you know, we don't care if you buy this, but you're probably going to buy it anyway because it's so great.
Right.
Yeah, I tend to book a lot of that. And then in promo, I've sat a lot in like the gritty drama space, and you know, like more gritty reads. And it's just, it seems to be this, when I do the accent, it's like a more comfortable place that my voice goes to. And it's also a fun character to tap into.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, you've been in this business so long now, I'm sure there's been like layers of you know, your transformation with your growth of performance. Maybe earlier on you were booked for a different style, and then you've kind of grown with your talent. Did you start a different way, or were you always going, that edgy thing was always natural for you?
No, it was, you know, come in and it's like the bright young guy.
Yeah.
And I was a young guy, and I felt positive about the world, and now I've since been jaded. No, I'm just kidding. Now I've seen what is truly no. But no, when I started off, I would skew towards that younger guy sound, and that's where I would be put. Truth be told, I've always enjoyed playing around with different vocal placements, and you know, I love mimicry and just like exploring the the human voice as an instrument. But now, but in that early stage of my career, it was definitely, my voice just sat higher and
well, you have to have a passion for it because of everything now. If you were asked all the different requirements, like you were saying, the character could be, it's almost like you're creating a voice with a history behind it. The character has a history. And so it's like you said, he lived in Germany for a while, but he lives in America. But it's there's so many layers. It goes beyond the standard, spec that, we would be requested to try to, fulfill. And that's, you have to have a passion for that to make it work, which you seem to be doing.
Yeah, and I think like beyond the mechanics of the accent and the placement of the voice, all these reads have to have a story. Well, they have to be connected to story. That's our job is telling a story, whatever is put in front of us, and making it true to us in some way. And I think with a lot of these, let's call them voices or accents that I work in, a lot of them, like where the character sits in me, or that character has auditioned so many times, or done so many jobs, that there is almost like it's like a different part of my personality, or an experience that I've had in travels. And even sometimes I'm just tapping into either a person in my life as a friend or a family member, or someone that I've just randomly met along the way, and they left an impact on me as a as a person, as a performer. And then I guess what I'm doing in my work is just utilizing either the real story that's there of that person, or the story that has just evolved for that character as I've gone along. And then that helps me to make the performance authentic and not just putting on a different accent or doing a voice. Our work these days, especially, I think more than ever, just has to be rooted in authenticity and dripping with humanity. And so
Right.
I just try to do whatever I can each and every time at the mic to make that happen.
These are the benefits of getting older, because we have experiences. And because I have younger students who I'll say, what do you, try to give them reference points, and they're like, don't know what I'm talking about, because they haven't lived their life yet to be able to. And I'm always saying, look around you, and whoever you have in your life, or someone you see at the grocery store and you hear a voice or you see how they hold themselves. It's just a matter of observation and really trying to, all right, make fun of people behind their back. That's what we do, but if it creates your next character, and as long as you're not hurting anybody's feelings to their face, that's usually what I suggest. But it is definitely an advantage to having more experience and, taking the lumps as well as the fun of this business.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the outstanding and moving art that's been created over history by people who've lived very troubled and dark lives, whether actors, artists, singers, like the suffering that they've gone through makes their art what it is. And I guess when I was younger, when I was a younger performer, I thought about that, and would wonder, do I have enough, depth in my life to make my performances as compelling as, I don't know, pick anyone from
Right.
arts and history, but do I have that? And then as the years went on, and through good stuff and bad stuff, I think just staying tuned into what is going on in your life, and always reflecting on it, and like you said, noticing people that are around you, and you just really have to stay aware, because if you block it out, it's to me, it's wasted fodder. It's wasted opportunity for creating. And if something crappy happens, I think you just have to live it. You have to experience it fully, and
Embrace it.
It's hard for us these days to not dumb it down with try to wash it away with Netflix or whatever else distracts us. But it's, as a performer, it's really useful to just sit in that stuff.
That's key. Well, this is wonderful. Thank you so much. I loved hearing about your experiences, Matt. This is fantastic. And look, we didn't even know what we were going to talk about. We wound up talking about all these fantastic things, especially your accents and all the different voices you do. That's wonderful. So thank you again for sharing.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So now you have a couple of websites. You want to just let us know what they are and people can check them out. And I'm going to also post them in the notes too.
Sure, yeah. So for my voiceover work, it's mattcowlrick.com, and I'm newly back on social media, so you might find me on some of the various socials, and then the consulting business I own where we support people with CRMs in particular, and the business tools for creatives, just kind of taking all the energy that creatives have and then porting it into the systems for productivity and execution. Right. That company is called Timber Creative, so it's timbercreative.ca. And we work with Zoho CRM and the whole Zoho business suite.
Oh, fantastic. Wonderful. Well, everybody's always looking for a new CRM to try out.
For sure. Yeah.
And I'm going to check out Structured. Now you got me all excited about that.
I hope it works out. Yeah, I'm really loving
those things.
It's a neat tool.
Thank you again. That wraps up another episode of the Voiceover Gurus podcast. Don't forget, we do have workouts happening all the time now that we're back. So make sure you join us for one of those. And everybody have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for listening to the Voiceover Gurus Podcast. Real talk about the voiceover industry. Learn more about us and get coaching at voiceover.guru.